He knew. And,
All right, so now we're on the computer now.
Predicted Ferguson and things like that. I mean, the fire next time. A place, a point at which when people say, enough's enough. I mean, those who are conscious, because you realize not everyone is conscious. Some people are still plugged into the matrix.
Well, that's like I was sharing with Dante, to actually be in the middle of that, to be in Ferguson, to be out there with those people, fearing, I may get shot with a rubber bullet. It was really real. It was really real. That's a once in a lifetime experience.
I mean, in a simple way, it's the reality of Black life. I mean, I think everybody in this room, I get a little nervous when the cops behind me.
Yeah,
I've never been in trouble for anything.
Yes.
But I'm always let me sit down, let me do this, let me make sure, whatever. It's a fear that we all carry with us in ways that other people don't have to.
Absolutely.
Even if you've done nothing wrong, you feel guilty.
Yes.
So because you're in a society that assumes you're guilty before you're ever innocent.
Well, I would just like to add this to the conversation. My mother, even before these incidents were as prevalent as they are now, gave me that talk. You ever get pulled over, don't talk back, don't try to run, because they're killing young black people. And I was told this in 1994.
I was told this in 2000, the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people don't realize that we have to have different conversations, with our children to keep them alive.
Yeah.
Keep them alive. So a lot of people don't get that. Well, you're exaggerating. Well, okay. I'm not going to sit here and explain what I have to do to survive.
Yeah. Especially if you're not going to try and understand it.
Well, and that's the thing. That's why, I was saying to you, if you, some people just want to argue with you just to hear their own voices, not to deepen their understanding. And all that's going to do is make you tired. So when I sense that's what's going on, Dante the other day, I'm good with leaving people stuck on stupid.
Exactly.
I'm not starting at another gray hair with somebody else.
Tell me.
It's just, it's
Well, see, you're playing all the songs that were popular when I was you guys.
Well, that's what I was telling Dante when we put the playlist together. And I talking my language now.
Yeah.
We grew up on this too, y'all.
Okay.
No, y'all were. No, I was like.
We were watching video soul.
Yeah,
We
were at the club.
That's what I'm saying. We was watching with Donnie and Rachel. You remember? Maria
That was
Riddles.
back when I would go out at 11 o'clock. Now I'm like at 7 o'clock.
We still remember Teen Summit with Anonymous Lewis. Lazarus.
Oh, wrong Teen
But what I'm saying is, some things. Just a few,
How can we get a zoom in on Morgan's boots, though? I'm trying to figure out, because those
I've had to put myself on a shoe buying hiatus.
Well, we don't have that advanced technology. We don't have point, tilt, and zoom cameras. Those are about a couple grand a piece. So we got to make it with these little regular old webcams.
You better say Sherry Carter from BET.
Hey, man, you know it. It's my sister.
I was reading this book. I don't remember what the name of it was, but
All right, so Dante and Chelsea, when we come back from break,
African American guy.
I turn the mics on, just all right, and we're back on Melaninaire. Dante Martin. This is kind of quick introduction who I was there, and boom, back right into it.
He's a photographer, so he wrote the book, and he wanted to incorporate those photographs because he felt like there was no documentation, like photographs and things like that of Black life, Black families, different things like that. So he writes his book, and it has all of these different photos that were taken during the previous civil rights movement, and him as a child just within his family. And there's a part in the book where he talks about when they were pushing for affirmative action to push through. And so he shows images of the backlash that was received by, non-people of color, and they were out with their signs that said basically like White Lives Matter, and that's so similar to like the opposition that the Black Lives Matter movement had passed. And so like how do we, like if you don't know history, we're gonna keep repeating the same things over and over again. So with like there's a big movement now, like people, waking up to everything that's going on. So how do we move towards the future in a way that we break out of this repetitive cycle and like really move forward to making some change?
I think we have to bear in mind that change is always happening.
Yeah.
Just because you don't see it right in front of you doesn't mean it isn't happening. And a big part of it to me is dismantling white supremacy. Because you make cracks in the armor and then the armor refortifies itself when people get comfortable and complacent. But that's work is gonna, it's not gonna happen, next week, 6 months, 5 years from now. There'll be progress. There's always been progress, but it didn't get this way overnight, so we're not going to be able to change it overnight. I'm a very big fan of the each one, teach one, sort of person. I always tell my students in my class, take this knowledge.
Who said that yesterday?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Take the knowledge, share with somebody else.
30 seconds.
Share it with somebody else. If you're keeping it to yourself, it's selfish. Maybe you, because some people they don't have the opportunity to be exposed to some of these things. Sometimes you have to.
20 seconds, headphones on.
And leave it to them to sew it.
I don't think I can go any further.
We are back. Melaninaire Millennials. We are back. It's Dante, Mallory, Chelsea, Morgan, and Dr. Sharice Jones Branch. So when we left off, we were talking about portrayals and basically portrayals of people of color over time and in different mediums. And so, Dr. Branch, could you give us maybe kind of a historical overview of the people of color, the view of people of color over time?
Well, that really starts from the moment people of European and African descent make contact, right? Because first you have to justify reasons to enslave people, then you have to justify reasons to keep them enslaved, then you have to justify reasons to keep them operating in a second-class status, right? And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to convince other people that these people are unintelligent, uneducable, heathenistic, bestial, hypersexual, whatever. And you have to keep perpetuating those stereotypes over the course of generations until people, even the people you're talking about, believe it, right? Because it's not just a matter of other people believing it, it's how often people like us continue to perpetuate those kinds of stereotypes. And you've always had different kinds of media. In the 19th century, maybe you didn't have Facebook, but you had newspapers, and you had theatrical productions where they would perform things like minstrel shows, for example. And that's what that was about. That was about ridiculing particular groups of people, right? And if you're in the urban north, it's going to be European ethnic groups, but that fades away over time. The one constant is the negative portrayals of African Americans or African descended people. Right. So none of that is new. I have my students watch a video in my civil rights class called Ethnic Notions, and it talks about the history of Jim Crow and how these stereotypes last over time. And the most classic example was Aunt Jemima pancakes. Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's rice. Yeah. Right? Stereotypes like that. And if you ever notice, they have updated Aunt Jemima. Now she has a curly perm or whatever, so she no longer looks like natural. She no longer looks like Nanny from Gone with the Wind, but she's still selling pancakes,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And they didn't get rid of that name. Aunt Jemima makes too much money, and it's been making money for at least 60, 70 years, or maybe even longer. So they're not going to do away with that.
Yeah.
Right. And also notice that Aunt Jemima or Mammy is always dark complected.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Right. So there are negative connotations attached to that as well, but perhaps that's a whole other show.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we are going to move into some art from a artist. His name is Michael Ray Charles, and his art style is, he says, it's graphically styled paintings investigate racial stereotypes drawn from a history of African American advertising, product packaging, billboards, radio jingles, and television commercials. So if you're watching live, we have 3 pictures on the screen, and we're just going to talk about them each one by one, and we'll start with Likes the Ball, Eat It Up. For those of you who cannot see and are listening on KLEK 102.5 on the radio, the picture just shows a very dark complected young man. He has a basketball in his hands, and inside of the basketball is watermelon. And you can tell that he's taking a bite out of the watermelon, and it has the NBA quote unquote logo here on the bottom. So what do you all think that this portrays for, what is this portraying to everyone who sees this? I got these images off of Google, so they are open for the world to see. So what do we think about these?
I think it's always interesting. I would take something like this and compare and contrast it with ads from the late 19th, early 20th, mid-20th century. What's always striking to me is that the figure always has very white eyes.
Yes.
Always very white eyes, very large lips, always very pearly white teeth. And if you also notice, it's not just a basketball, it's a watermelon. Right? So there's always the stereotype about the watermelon. And I was talking to a group somewhere just a few days ago, and I said, where do these stereotypes come from, and particularly the one about the watermelon? And well, that was something that was easy for Black people to grow and sell after emancipation. So what does this mean? You can grow stuff, you can sell stuff, you can realize a profit, you can set up a business. It means you are acting as free people in a world that does not want you to be free.
Right.
So, what do you do about that? You ridicule it and you turn it into something negative.
Yeah.
And so even today in 2018, there are African Americans who are afraid to eat watermelon because of a stereotype that someone else created.
Wow. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I can send you the article. And also the idea that having dark skin is bad or unattractive.
Yeah.
It's no.
And this whole light skin versus dark skin.
Absolutely.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you guys can tell too, but if you look at the background, I didn't notice this until now, but it's actually a puzzle.
Yes.
And there's a piece gone
Yes.
out of life.
Yes.
Not out of ball, not out of eat, out of life.
Out of life.
So coming back, when we come back, we're gonna be coming back to you guys talking about how we are portrayed in Hollywood, the media, and civil movements, and kind of get just what Black history and African Americans, how they're portrayed to the millennial eye, and also from Dr. Branch. So stay tuned, and we'll get back with you guys soon.
This is Leo with your KLEK.
All right, good discussion. Let's keep it going about the media portrayals.
So you guys want to keep talking about the art?
Yeah.
So next we have the Pillsbury Doughboy, and it says "Serving with a Smile."
All right, let me pull that up. Want this one?
Nope, you can go back.
Okay, so y'all still on
Yep,
this
that
one?
second picture there.
Alright, so let me feed this back over the string. Okay.
All right, so we have the second picture. It says "Serving with a Smile," and we have the Pillsbury Doughboy, and he has on sunglasses.
Oh, does it?
Mm-hmm. You can't really see that he has on sunglasses on here, but on the actual computer, you can see that he has on sunglasses. And just like Dr. Branch said, yet again, we see he has very, very dark complected skin, large red lips. What you see now?
Yo, is that the flag tied around his neck? Is that the stripes from the American flag tied around his neck?
That
Like
very much be so.
Yeah, it looks like
which could be very symbolic
Yeah.
itself. If
Yeah,
that's what that
absolutely.
is. It's like, okay.
America's children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Down to you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next picture. We see some toy soldiers, and we have after black and before black. So I think that you normally have before and after. So that was saying something to me. In this picture, I was kind of gonna look to Dr. Branch's depiction of it because I don't know what they're trying to say.
I can't see it that well. I just see some folks sitting down.
Well, they're kind of, okay, to the right, they're all broken up. Like, they're in different pieces. The body parts are dismembered and spread around. And you see that in the back, he also has the basketball pole. There's a basketball down there. They've got chickens on top of them. So I didn't really know, like,
So what is, I mean, it almost seems to me like it suggests that the presence of blacks is somehow destructive. I don't know, because like I said, I'm having a hard time seeing it. It's really interesting because I've seen images like this about African Americans in the military a long time ago, because the military was segregated until 1948, even though we fought wars for democracy. And it's really interesting because people were afraid of African Americans as soldiers. They were afraid because they had weapons, but they also didn't believe they would be brave soldiers.
Right.
So it's sort of contradictory. You need them, but you're afraid of them, which really is a theme throughout American history. I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, all I see on the right-hand side is something about them being destructive and only being able to play basketball or something. Maybe I'm making too much out of that.
We got a Facebook shout out. Y'all see it?
Mm-mm.
So Helen Scott, she says, I grew up hearing the phrase light bright, damn near white. No color is safe.
No color is safe.
Yeah.
No color. No color is safe. I mean, and that's saying to me, no color as in no shade is safe, and
Yeah.
also it's saying that no color.
Yeah.
Is
Well,
safe.
I mean, essentially, if nobody's free till we're all free, right? I mean, because people don't understand that when you keep up certain kinds of oppressive systems, you're not free. You're living in fear because you are always concerned about what these people who are oppressed are going to do to you. So you're not free because you're creating even more oppressive structures to keep them in place.
Right.
That suggests fear. Because if you're not worried about them, why would you waste the time?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting that you say that because prior to me being in Jonesboro, I was in a private school in New York, and it was predominantly white. And I was taking a sociology class, and we were on the subject of different forms of oppression and white supremacy and whatnot. And the instructor, I don't remember how she worded the question, but the response of one of the white males in the class was, what's to say that if people of color were not being oppressed the way they are, who's to say they won't turn around and do the same thing to us?
Sure, but you're projecting your guilt.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're projecting your guilt on the people of color.
That's
But that's been a theme, trust me, all throughout American history. I always tell my students, for example, when we look at the Emancipation Proclamation, I said, first of all, it doesn't free blacks everywhere. It frees blacks in states that were under Confederate control. Secondly, what does Lincoln do? He tells black people not to seek revenge. They're always concerned about black people seeking revenge. And I mean, this is transgenerational, right? There's always that fear. When Obama was elected, all black people are going to act out. There's always that fear that leads them to always have to keep people of color in control because I think these people are afraid of reaping what they've sown. Quite frankly.
Do you think that it's time to move away from images? I don't know when these images were made. Are these recent?
These are fairly recent because he's a fairly new artist, right?
So, do you think that it's time to move away from these kind of images. It's important to document it, but is it time to move away from these stereotypes and start to push for more images that are positive rather than perpetuating the watermelon and the basketball and
Of course. I mean, I think we need the history though. We don't need to forget. We always need to talk about it. We always need to be ready to combat it when it pops up because it will. Gone ain't gone forever, right? Well, they used to say every closed eye ain't sleeping, every goodbye ain't gone. You know, that's sort of what this is. But I mean, what needs to happen and what is happening. So we keep talking about what needs to happen rather than what's happening. Because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. We are doing this. Case in point, Black Panther.
Right.
You know, I mean, we've been doing this, but I also think that we don't need to live our lives worrying about what other people think about us.
Yeah.
Because that's the damage, right? That we can't be our fullest selves. We're always worried about what other people are going to say. Sort of like when you're in the line at Walmart, one of your people is acting a fool.
Yeah.
Right? We're like, that really has nothing to do with you, right? What's your first thought? They're making the whole race.
Exactly.
I don't know this person.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with them.
Yeah.
Why do I feel guilty?
Yeah.
You know, because again,
Yeah.
it's the idea that we should all feel guilty. We should all be judged by the action that we feel. But everybody else gets to be an individual.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an individual. I am part of a collective, but I also claim being an individual. What you do has nothing to do with me. You know? So, I mean, what we need to work on is getting rid of that guilt and allowing ourselves to be fully human. Right? Like I was telling somebody, and I'm not going to monopolize the conversation, but like, you know, the angry Black woman thing. I have every right to be angry. But that is not the only emotion I possess.
Yes.
I live on a spectrum, just like
Yes.
other people do.
Yes. Yeah.
I feel like we should pass the collection plate next year.
I'm getting ready to show myself. I know. If you have cash, I will pay my time.
I'm zeroing in on my anger rather than
Yeah.
focusing on whether or not my anger is justified. I'm generally a happy person, but when I'm pissed off, there's a reason for it.
And that's the only thing that's highlighted.
And it's the only thing that's highlighted.
Like
if I possess no other emotions.
Yeah.
You know, but everybody else can be all upset. And it's, oh, we have to help.
So Dr. Jones, how do you suggest that how do we help this new generation so they can reclaim their fullest self? So it's not
it's
to
a process. It's a process, and I think I think about things like that. Black Panther. I think it's important for you to see people doing positive things, or to see people like you in the full spectrum of people like you. You know, I mean, we are more than just whatever people think we are. And the other thing is, if you don't know the history, you can't know the greatness that you come from. You can't know, even us sitting in here in this predominantly Black radio station, that's not new. It's not new. It's new here, but it's not new. So we need to start thinking about our history as a negative thing, as a burdensome thing, as a problematic thing, and start embracing it. Everybody has good stuff and bad stuff in their history. We start to like the bad stuff. Like, I don't like to just teach a history of victimization. I like to teach a history of progress and victories, because there's that too. You know, there's that too. And even in the moments when we have been most oppressed, there are victories, because we struggled against it every step of the way. You don't always win, but the struggle is important, right? But we're not hearing it.
Right.
We were slaves. That's a bad thing. Well, we survived. We're still here. We ran away. We fought back. We tore against the stuff. That's resistance. It matters. It means that we didn't passively accept those oppressive conditions. And as I told y'all there before, I'm unapologetically Black.
Yeah. Yes.
I hear that.
Yes.
25 seconds.
It is intergenerational.
How do I, this is like really, like these headphones right here. How can I extend?
Should be. I think you chose a short stick. I think. Yeah, that's why I put. Yeah, you chose a short stick. You may have to just kind of pull your chair up a little closer. Go.
Welcome back. We are back with Melaninaire, Millennials, back with Dr. Sharice Jones Branch, talking about portrayals over time, in all different types of media, in movies, in newspapers, just in anything that any different type of media that we've seen over time and how that has changed.
We're gonna just jump right into Black portrayal, and I'm gonna give you all the definition of portrayal. Portrayal is a depiction of someone or something in a work of art or literature. So let's just jump right into it. What are we, our history, and us as a collective whole? What are we portrayed as to you all? Like, what do you see us being portrayed as? Is it positive? Is it negative? What kind of light is shown on us?
Are you talking about as millennials or just as Black people in general?
As a collective, all of us. What are we? What are they saying, Mal? What are they saying?
Well, you know what? I'm actually kind of excited because, you know, I think during this time, we are able to see predominantly all forms of who we are. And a lot of it is controlled by us because we are innovators. Like we mentioned last week with social media, that has had a huge impact on our visibility to the point where, you know, people are taking advantage of YouTube and they're showcasing their creativity and they're landing deals. Mm-hmm. You know, they're landing multi-million-dollar deals in Hollywood and so on and so forth. But I think we're able to see all of us, even with our iPhones, we're taking videos and showing it. So I think at this time, like, I think the coolest thing to me is that African Americans are not shown as one narrow portrayal. There is a faceted view of who we are and to the fact that we are represented in all shapes, forms, and fashion across the spectrum. And I'm really appreciating that now. Didn't see it so much as a kid, but I see it now, and it's cool. It's cool.
And to your point, like when you look at, and like it's not just African Americans creating those videos, but they're creating videos with substance. You know, you looking at some of these videos, and these boys and women are talking about life. You know, they're talking about real experiences that they may go through, that other people go through, and that they're really, you know, adding to the value of what it means to be African American, especially today. You know, especially living in this generation. So I think that I like the way it's going, and I know like last. We talked about, you know, the whole Renaissance thing. Yes. We living in a Renaissance, you know, and like Dr. Brent said, you know, a lot of times we may not know that we're living in something, but we're living in it. You know?
Absolutely.
So that's one of those things that I thought about.
What about you, Maureen? How are we portrayed?
I think that so long as it's not us, as long as we have other people directing, writing our stories to, you know, put out there, it's not gonna be authentic. It may be negative, whether that's on purpose or maybe, you know, not on purpose. But I think as long as we're not putting our own images out there, our own stories out there, it's not going to be portrayed in a positive light, or it's not going to truly reflect who we are.
We got a Facebook shout out from Helen Scott. She says, Black people were put in positive, successful images, car commercials, homeowners, etc. But then we started being told that that was boisterous and beloved. It's past time to stop allowing ourselves to be oppressed. Our history teaches us more than the ugly truth. Does our history encourage you all on a regular basis?
For myself, our history does encourage me on a regular basis. Not even just history that we read in the books, but even our family lineage. That's all part of history. How we were talking about, we're depicted with very dark skin. Like I've shared with Dante and Mallory and Morgan about how it took me until I was probably 18, 19 to actually be comfortable with being a dark complected woman. And that was all because of how we were portrayed, what society had put into my head. A majority of my family is dark complected. And to me, of course, we are beautiful people, my whole entire family. But just to see us, being portrayed as, they say Black is very sweet as juice.
And good Black don't cry.
Hey. I mean, I am every day. Like with Black Panther, I could not stop crying. I couldn't stop crying because I'm just like, we made it. Like I felt like we made it, So our history and now the past, the middle, the image, all of it, it does is it encourages me on that.
Yep, and to your point, every single day, like just every time I look at something like Katherine Johnson, man, there's nothing I can't do. Lewis Latimer, there's nothing I can't do. Benjamin Banneker, there is nothing, man.
Absolutely.
Every single day,
And I
every
think
single
that's what's important. If you don't know that, you don't know that you
No.
can do these
Absolutely.
things, and that people like you have always done these things. It's not
Always.
new.
Mhm.
It's not new.
I'm telling you. And so it's important. I think that we it's important that we look to our history and we use that as a foundation to our future in a way. You know, and we use that as, like you said, as to understand that there's nothing we can't do. You know, Lewis Latimer, he was in the Navy in a time where black people, like you said, weren't, you know, they were feared. You know, and he was an inventor, you know, and he was a patent. Like our history is amazing.
It's a really beautiful thing, and to your point about putting out our own movies or whatever, we've always done that. Look at Oscar Michaud. He was doing this way back
Conversation
when.
continues after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's Kelly K.
I mean,
He just cut me off.
yeah, but Oscar Michaud.
Oscar Michaud, and you know, and also, you know, what about these indie black producers? You know, they don't have multi-million-dollar movie studios backing them, but they're doing it.
The young man with the iPhone that was a football player. Matthew something. He's black. I'll find it.
I mean, Issa Rae got famous off of YouTube.
She did.
That awkward black girl. That was
Yes.
insecure, you know.
Yeah, it really was.
All they're doing is standing on the back of all these people that come before them. But again, if you don't know that, you don't know that.
So I have a question.
Um,
Do you all feel like to everyone but us, it's okay for us to be black sometimes?
so what happened?
It's okay for us to be black sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
Like,
with
okay,
who?
it's okay with them. Like it's acceptable for us to be black only at certain times. Like let's just say this is gonna sound real, but just bear with me, okay? Like okay, me and you know white homie, okay, all right? But we're at a store. There's somebody that comes in and you know they're disruptive. They're making my friend of Caucasian descent. They're making them uncomfortable. Is it okay? And he like, bro, I know you got this. So instantly, it was okay for me to be black. I've been in situations where I felt like, you know, sometimes it was acceptable.
I get it. So,
It was acceptable. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's okay for me to be black sometimes.
I don't care.
Me neither. But I mean, do you feel like sometimes it's okay for to them?
Or
You get what I'm
sometimes
saying?
that like people feel that way. I guess other people feel like, okay, it's cool for you to have that moment now, but you know what I'm saying?
But
Other
in a
times,
minute,
like,
you're gonna have to bring it back to your regulation. But for right now, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much that way all the time. I mean, I think about even being in academia where you know, we were trained and have to behave, blah, blah, blah. This is me. Every day. It doesn't mean that I'm not smart or well educated or well colored. It doesn't mean those things are not mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive. I can speak standard English just as well as anybody else. When I get around my people, and especially when I get back to South Carolina.
I'm telling you.
Right.
You know, but and even in those moments, it doesn't mean that I am dealing with unintelligent people. It just means that I'm dealing with people who wield the English language differently. That's it. Yeah, that doesn't even intellect.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm not in the business of apologizing. I'm not giving anybody's fragility. I'm a nice person. I'm easy to get along with, but I have to be me.
Yeah.
I have to be me. The world is stressful enough moving through the world in this body.
Yes.
I'm not going to add stress onto that.
Yeah.
I'm just not. You know, I mean, I'm the black woman who walks in with her hair piled up to here,
Okay.
and I'm going to class. That's it.
I'm
Yeah,
telling
yeah.
And I'm going to work.
We have another Facebook shout out from Robert Hernandez says, I see you, Chelsea.
Hi, TT.
Excellent.
Hi, TT. Come on, TT, y'all. I'm trying to share or just share it from his page and log in on your phone. Hi, Sierra.
See what?
Yeah.
So, like, I know that,
Oh well, let's bring it back when we come on air. We'll be back in about 30 seconds.
You know, radio time goes really fast.
it does. I got a smile. I'm so, oh,
You look serious.
right now.
All right, stand by, everyone, please.
Seriously.
I'll bring it in. Alright, you all, and we are back. Today we're discussing history, and we have a very special treat. We have Dr. Sharice Jones Branch with us today, and she's giving us her insight as well. So we're gonna hop right back into Black Portrayal. How do you all feel that we are portrayed in or represented in civil movements?
So I think that okay, so growing up in Atlanta, right, that was the basis of a black child's upbringing. I feel like, you know, my grandma, I lived on Ralph David Avenue. You
Okay.
know, we volunteered at Hosea Feed the Hungry.
Okay,
You
okay.
know, and we learned about MLK all the
Check
time.
that resume.
Yeah,
Okay.
For real.
I'm
But
sure.
that was that was for us, like growing up, especially with my grandma, you know, she would tell me all the time, she stayed in her backyard and watched MLK march down the street. You know what I'm saying? And so like that was whenever we were told about that portrayal and whenever that portrayal was given to us, it was always put on a pedestal. Like it was always like, this is our shining moment, y'all. This is when we did it. And like to see my mom, my grandma, any of them just talk about it, you can tell that just like everybody, I feel like everybody was a part of that, you know. And so when I think about those portrayals during those civil movements, I always think about shining moments. You know, we did that. We did that.
That's
Got a
awesome.
couple of Facebook shout outs. Sierra Dixon says, "Oh, that's Chelsea. OMG, I
Nice
didn't even
to meet
recognize you. You look good." And she says, "I love this. You guys are doing great."
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's awesome to hear because Dante, you know, we always kind of talk about, you know, he came from Atlanta. I came from Belleville, Illinois, small town right outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and we were not placed on a pedestal. We learned about what I like to call the showcase African Americans, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X,
Rosa Parks. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
We got our three, you know, but I also got to see that other side where my grandmother, she was 96 when she passed away last year. She was born in 1920. So I also got to see portrayals over time and how she would tell me, you know, she made 75 cents, maybe, in a week for picking cotton, you know, and I got to see, but still to her, you know, it was something for her that carried her. It taught her how to be a hard worker. It taught her how to teach us how to be hard workers and, you know, to always make sure we did our best. So I think that, you know, I got both ends. I got to see us put on a pedestal from people who I grew up with, but then when I went to school, I did not. It was your washed down, generalized Black History Month, and that was all we got.
Another Facebook shout out. Helen Scott says, "Love you guys. Stay black. God bless."
And Dr. Branch, stay unapologetic.
But Chelsea, that's funny that you said that you got the wash down history. Today I went to Mosaic Templars in Little Rock, and one of the Mosaic Templars and to Little Rock Central High. One of the startling things for me as an adult, we talk about, you know, Black history growing up, and then as we get older, one of the things that stood out to me, we learned about the Little Rock Nine in a way that I never learned about in school. The fact that those students waited 3 weeks to get into the school because of all of the tension, but not only that, with the Arkansas National Guard, you know, working under the orders of Governor Faubus at that particular time, and learning that they were not there for the protection of the students. Those are not necessarily things that we learned in school. They glossed over several things.
And they also glossed over the fact that those students terrorized every day.
Yes.
And of course, nobody knew what post-traumatic stress syndrome was, but it's no accident that most of them left the state and didn't come back for decades. For decades. Minnie Jean Brown left the country, moved to Canada.
Yes.
Stayed there for about 30 years, only came back because her mother was ill.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, just think about that. I mean, you're a kid.
Yes.
You're a kid, and there are people who are trying to kill you.
Yes.
Right? So yeah, I mean it's highly problematic the way people sanitize history
Yes.
and completely ignore the fact that these kids were being traumatized. These are teenagers.
Yes.
I mean, think about the kinds of things all you wanted to do was go to school and have these kids like you. I can't remember who said it, but they said, well, once they meet me, they'll surely like me. That's not how that went down. So, you know, they're not telling you about the trauma
Yes.
that happens as a result of those
Yes.
kinds of experiences. That's what's often left out of the story.
And the trauma that
Got
they
a
pass down.
Facebook shout out from Lachey Robinson. She says, "Good evening, everyone."
Hi,
Hi,
Robinson. How you doing?
But yeah, that they pass that trauma down to generations as
It's
well.
transferred.
As
Yeah.
the same thing from, you know, from slavery as well. You know, the
Absolutely.
different ways in which we've learned how to cope and different things, which also affected how we saw each other.
Sure, absolutely. That doesn't, you know, I can't stand it when people say, well, slavery was so long ago, why are we still talking about it? Because we still live with it. There's
Yeah.
a reason why there's transgenerational trauma. We can't transfer transgenerational wealth.
Yes.
How you gonna transfer what you don't have and what you weren't allowed to access?
Yes.
All right. And just another point about Mary Jean Brown. I think she has 5 or 6 kids, but I know a couple of them, they can't stand stepping foot on this side of the border. Yeah. Because it's just such a different experience. And not that Canada's perfect, but it's such a different experience from what they have had in Canada. Transgenerational, right?
Yes.
Transgenerational.
Yes.
Mr. Branch, can you talk a little bit about how movements like the Black Panther movement and Black Lives Matter, like how when we see a lot of these rebellious groups, when they come about and how they're portrayed in terms of the media, like
Morgan.
obvious.
We're actually gonna have to answer that on our Facebook Live feed. We're gonna go back to more, but we're back. This is Kayla K.
You did not so well, Nancy.
Yeah, well, I hate to be the buzzkill, but
No, you doing
but that's a great question. So while we're continuing our Facebook Live, so
We put
you
the
know,
feet
go ahead.
up. But, I mean, that's what they portray very badly in the media.
Yeah, that's all I have for you. Thank you for
And you're not looking at the nuances and complexities of those movements and the individuals involved in those movements. I mean, people thought Black Panthers were a bunch of rabble rousers, but they understood the law very well because the police are brutalizing people then now. Not all. There's wonderful cops out there, but the bad ones, you know, something needs to be done about that. But they're aware of the law, they're aware of their rights, they're asserting themselves in ways that people of color aren't supposed to, or that when they do it, people find it problematic.
I think that it's important for them to respond the reason they're responding the way they are. Like there's a oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they're doing it on purpose so that you'll have more people to look at it like it is something bad or be in opposition with it rather than focusing on why it is we have NFL players kneeling, why it is we have people protesting in these different
I think there are people who really don't want to know, and again, I think there are people out there who are most comfortable when we accept the racial and the gender status quo. Because when we start protesting and challenging that, we disrupt people's comfort, right? And that fear very quickly becomes anger and the need to have to control us. I'm convinced by that because, you know, why aren't people making an effort to understand what Kaepernick, you know what I mean? Why aren't they trying to understand? It's not difficult. It's not difficult, right? People have been telling, and why is it so hard to believe that this is what people of color are experiencing every day, except for the fact that you don't want to. Because when you truly understand, don't you have to do something? Right? I think that's a difficult thing to do. I think it's very difficult to own how pervasive white supremacy is. It's not about white people. Nobody's saying they don't like white people, but there are oppressive systems in place that have been there for generations that have allowed you certain kinds of access, certain kinds of privileges, and now you're afraid all that's going to be taken away. Thinking about it as a zero-sum game. It's not. I'm not trying to keep you away from the table. I'm just trying to get more people to sit at the table. Right? And for some people, that means you lose something. All right?
But we all gain. We're all able to sit at
Well,
the table.
if you have common sense, you know this.
I mean, like,
But no, a lot of people are not thinking about it. that way. I mean, it's the same thing when people make the argument about affirmative action. You
Right.
cannot let anybody into a position you are not supposed to if they are not qualified. So what's the assumption here? That if they're a person of color, they must not be as qualified as somebody.
Exactly.
That's foolishness. And nobody was challenging this when affirmative action was white.
Exactly.
You know, I mean,
Exactly.
because what's the
White
assumption
women.
then? If you are a white male, you must be better educated, more articulate, more read, better traveled. When I'm living in Jonesboro for 15 years, I know that's not true.
I have a question for you. Like this also goes along with images, and it also, but it's going a different way. You know, with the recent, and I know you gotta get out here, but the recent indictments that came out of the Russian operatives and things. Part of the plan that they were using, you know, they were using black profiles, images of black people.
Because it's easy to believe, right?
But why? Why do you think that works? Especially with like
Because we're always been pathological and criminal people.
yeah.
Right? When we look at somebody on TV, black people do this too, you know. We see somebody on TV, he must have done something.
Yeah.
What if he did nothing? And then people will work overtime to find the tiniest thing to make this person seem guilty. Mike Brown, he didn't do nothing but sell some cigarettes. Mostly. The way everybody does in New York. He didn't deserve to die for that. He's a big fella. And I mean, did it choke him to death because he's a big fella? Yeah. No, I mean, we have always been portrayed as criminals. It's so easy for people to believe. It's so easy for people to believe. I mean, think about all these shootings that have happened in these schools. Almost all of these are white men.
Right.
Well, he's got to do and we need to pray, and we need to this, and we need to that. That's when we dead.
Yeah. Sure.
Because it's easier to me, because this is not new. This has been ingrained in all of us, unfortunately, to believe that.
All right, top of the hour, we'll be going back live in about 1 minute.
You know, so you know, what we all have to do is
with
we
the
take those
KLK
things,
1 to 2.5 forecast.
ask why
And
you
this
think it is.
forecast is
And
brought
if
to you
there's
by
any truth
Get
in
Great
that.
Hair
You
and
know,
the
because we're
Biz.
all
Features
conditioned
Monet
on that.
Right.
hair products,
Some of us just wait
samples,
out.
and business
So you say you
opportunities.
gonna never
Are
wait.
You know,
available.
like we be praying, you know, when something happens, I praise not black. You know, the whole thought process. Like when the sniper came out, you know.
It'll be partly sunny Sunday with a chance for a shower late in the day, a high 55 to 60. Showers Sunday night in the low 50s. A windy Monday, partly to mostly cloudy with occasional
If you
showers.
pull multiple ones, just put the extra ones back on the top of the pile.
Entertain and empower. We're KLK on the 2.5 FM.
U.S. Justice Department has indicted over a dozen Russians.
Yeah, that's the hot water on the red.
Does it work?
Yeah, you have to squeeze those two together. It's got a safety feature. Squeeze them. There you go. It flows a little slower than the.
Man, you know Mr. Big on there, man.
Oh, I guess it did, but we'll take it out. So we'll just take it out.
It's 7:03. KLEK
I'll insert. Let's go ahead and get talk bench back started.
Minority Advocacy Council. It's time to swing the doors wide open to Bill's Night Spot. Bill's Night Spot is the soundtrack to your party. Bring it from our house to your house with the best of classic and current hip hop. Guaranteed to make you turn up your radio or just turn up, period. Your life, your music with KLEK 102.5 FM.
Go.
All right, you all, and we are back. This portion, we're going to get just a little bit more insight from Dr. Jones Branch before she has to leave. So, yesterday when we were talking, we wanted to know about the civil movements. In your opinion, how are they in comparison then to now? Do you feel like there was more activity then, or more things, like more action being put forth, or how do you view the movements throughout time?
I think I know that black people have always challenged their oppression. It's not new. The differences that I see are that, well, mostly the number one difference that I see in the 21st century is that social media. When it happens, people know about it instantly. They know about it everywhere on Earth, somewhere out in the galaxy. There's a marching us. People know immediately. But that's not to say that we didn't always have media. It was just different, 50 years ago. So I think that's the most fundamental thing. I think the other thing is that there are more non-black people who are aware. But that's not to say that there weren't That's not to say that there weren't those people way back when, either. I think we've just come of age in a time when there are younger people who are saying, you know, we want to live in a world where there's equal access for everybody, where there's peace, where there's no war. I just think we're seeing more of that now, but we've always had it. We've always had it. That's just not new. I mean, again, when we think about the past civil rights movement, I tend to think of it as a long civil rights movement, right? I don't
Right.
think of it as having an end,
Yeah.
because until everybody has equality and full access, there's still work to be done. But even way back when, you know, I always tell my students, if you want to write a paper about civil rights activists, don't just write about Black folks, write about Hispanic civil rights activists, write about Asian folks, you know, write about these different kinds of people who are equally as dedicated to full citizenship as everybody, but we don't hear about them. We think of civil rights as being a Black struggle. It's not just a Black struggle. It wasn't just Black activists. Find out who some of these people are. Right? And we don't even know. We know about Martin Luther King, I call him the triad. Right? Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. And we don't even complicate who those people are. Right? We think Rosa Parks was a 42-year-old old woman. You know, 42 is not old. I'm older than that. I'm not gonna tell you how old. but older than that. I mean, well,
Right.
when you get to it, you'll start feeling it. It's real. But I mean, and we always have to remember that we tend to focus on the big name people. I'm always very interested in the people who are always in the trenches. You know, Martin Luther King is important. We don't celebrate it. I'm glad it's a holiday. But who was there before him? You know, people didn't just realize they were being oppressed when he showed up.
Right.
They have been doing this work all along, and they're still doing the work. So when people say, well, where are the Martin Luther Kings or whatever, do we necessarily have to have that in order for people to be activists? No. Because at one point we didn't have it, and people were active.
Right.
So, yeah.
I agree. And so, do you think it's important for everybody to kind of pitch in their own way?
Absolutely.
Not to be just a certain way. Like, just because you ain't out protesting don't mean that.
Everything matters, right?
Yeah.
Everything matters. And I'm talking about this because I'm teaching a civil rights class this semester, but like, for example, when we talk about the Montgomery bus boycott, I'm going to challenge my students to figure out the logistics of the boycott, because all we know is people start riding the bus. Well, how do they get to work? Right? How do you fund a boycott? Right? What about food? What about food and civil rights activism? There are articles about that, there are books about that, but nobody talks about it because the popular image is of people marching in front of Woolworths. Right? And what if you're down in the rural South? You don't have a Woolworths. Right? So what's really important to me in thinking about any kind of movement, past, present, or future, let's expand the diversity of the players, and let's expand the diversity of the activism. Right?
We got a Facebook shout out to Ronnie Carter, who says true, very true.
Okay. So, also something that I would like to get Dr. Rachel's insight on before she leaves is breaking barriers. Mallory brought up a very good question about celebrating first. Mal, can you kind of further go into that a little bit more?
I guess, like, you know, my thought process was like, you know, here it is 2018. You know, there's so many people to this point that have broken, you know, so many barriers that have, you know, pushed us collectively forward. We're just, you know, wondering, like, in 2018, like, what does it truly mean to be the first? And, you know, why are we still celebrating first? Like, why is this such a big deal? And not so much as it a bad thing or anything like that, but why are we still having to celebrate first in 2018?
Because when everybody doesn't have equal access, it takes longer sometimes. Sometimes, and as I said before, sometimes it's not the first.
Right.
But, I mean, when you start further behind the race line, in the race than other people do, it's going to take a little while before you get to be the first. I mean, it's simply a matter of the history that we've had in this country where we have been denied access to certain kinds of things. I mean, bear in mind, it wasn't until about 1868 that Black people were even citizens in this country. And you do realize, of course, that it wasn't until then that Black people could even get a passport.
And we're gonna have to leave it there. We're gonna get ready to get back into some music. The conversation does resume on our Facebook Live feed, so if you want to still be a part of the conversation and listen in and tune in, just go on our Facebook, search for KLEK FM. But we will be back with more. This is KLEK on 2.5 FM.
Do you think it's a bad thing to even celebrate someone being the first, or in this day and age, should we continue, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think we should continue to do it, but I also think we should do the research to find out whether or not that is in fact the first, right? Right, because a lot of times it is, and it's just the first time maybe we've seen it in half a century. But in most cases, in my research, it's not the first. It's just we haven't heard about it before. Like, Barack Obama's not the first man to run for president. I was in high school when Jesse Jackson ran for president. He came to my school, right? Again, I won't tell you how long ago that was, but it's not the first time. It's the first time he got elected. I mean, a black person got elected,
Right.
all right? But that's not new. There's nothing new about that. I mean, yeah, and we have to be careful about that because it also denies the truth of our work throughout all of this time, which is to say that just because this person is the first, has there never been anyone who has tried to do this before? I don't accept that. We don't know about it.
Yeah.
We don't know about it. And also, I think a lot of times because the media tends to be not controlled by black people, we have to look at alternate sorts of media. So back in the day when all they had was newspapers, the mainstream newspaper might say one thing. What does the Arkansas State Press have to say about it? That's a black newspaper owned by Daisy Bates. You get a very different story when you look at black newspapers, right? I mean, let's take Jonesboro. You wouldn't even know black people live here.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't even know black people live in
Yeah.
You wouldn't even know that we're 20% of the population here based on Jonesboro Sun, Jonesboro occasion. Yeah,
That is true. We have several occasions that are never highlighted.
No, I mean, every once in a while.
Every once in a while.
One or two people will show up,
My
but
cousin was on there. Her name was Loveless. That's the only one.
well, let's not that.
Yeah.
Let's not
Or
say
even
that.
just
Yeah, there's a backstory.
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
But I mean, back when we had what was it? The newspaper that Lonnie Williams. I mean, the
African American perspectives.
there we had more presence, but we couldn't keep that up.
Yes.
We couldn't keep that up. So I mean, in lots of ways, the media has historically rendered black people invisible. And then you have to look at these alternate sites. And I want to say this too. Sometimes people, in their zeal to integrate, they don't think about all they lose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose a lot when you're trying to fit into the mainstream, because what that means is you have to act like the mainstream and not like you.
Yeah.
Her Facebook share from Lachey, she says, glad someone mentioned that.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
probably about.
Yeah.
That's not really.
Like, I think that it's great that we're pushing for more visibility in the media and creating our own. But what is happening, because there are people that are pushing for ownership, but in terms of the platforms, creating our own platforms to push our own art, our own history, our own
those things are
media. There, but that needs to be at the forefront. Ownership of these different hosting sites, whether that be.
All right, Kabila has a, let me interrupt, but I think this is kind of relevant. Kabila says, since we know that there's a lack of resources representing us, why don't we support them more?
good question.
Yeah.
This radio station
Because they
case in point,
exist.
right?
Exactly.
I'm trying to stay neutral.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it. I think about how difficult it's been at times for you to get the support, you need. We have the platform, right? We have the platform, and I'm on the board. I know who's supporting and who isn't.
And Lachey asks, that's why I'm so thankful for KLK. Well, we're thankful for you, and we're thankful for everyone that does support. And like Dr. Brent said, it has not been an easy road, and that's why we're having our first pledge drive, March 15th through the 18th. So if you like this platform that allows for us to get our views out there, please donate. You don't even have to wait till the 15th. Go on our website, klakfm.org. You can donate right now because it's not cheap. It costs $441 per day to keep this station going. But I'm not gonna take over this show with support. But don't worry, March 15th, you'll be hearing that story told for 72 hours or until I pass out.
I mean, that is true. with the Jonesboro Sun. Think about it. We had an article in the paper on the front page. Dante's name was mentioned once. There was no picture of us. There was nothing besides Chuck Kirkendall.
And how many people of color work with John Folsom?
Besides Steve Simpson. He also says we have the Arkansas Christian Journal that support them as well.
But you know, and I'm gonna get ready to go. You know, in Arkansas State in the library, we have an African American newspaper database. There are several newspapers, black newspapers, right here in Arkansas. You want to find out what's going on in black communities in Arkansas? Look at those papers. Look at the Chicago Defender. You want to know what's going on in rural black communities in the South? That newspaper will tell you. Like, so many people migrated from the South to Chicago. So we have the resources. It's just that a lot of times you think things are better on the other side.
Yeah, and also I think it's because, you know, if it doesn't look like what we envision it should look like, we don't support it. You know, because we are visual and everything versus saying, okay, let's get on board and help them to grow, and we grow with them. Because we are collective.
Switch to Dr. Brent's spot.
And I think the other thing is too,
again,
we have to divest ourselves from white supremacist
Yes.
thinking, because we always believe that if somebody black does it, they're charging too much.
Yeah.
They're not doing it right. They're not paying us time.
Yeah.
We let other people screw up around all day long.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Dr. Brent's spot.
Thank I am for applause for that. See you later.
Thank you, Dr. Brent.
Hey, it's like that now.
I'm telling you, how y'all play
I'll
with
take
this game.
that.
Just remember to leave a section for Allie.
Oh yeah, Allie girl. We gonna talk
Allie
about
missing out. Allie missed out.
we gonna talk about how you missed out.
We gonna talk about.
We gonna talk about how you missed out.
We do it for fun.
Yeah, that's cool, though. That's cool.
Yes, okay, so we doing straight into this.
Yeah, those for the strange. In fact, I need to plug this one back into. But yeah,
Okay.
you got an Android or iPhone?
Android.
Well, yeah, we got plenty. Just grab something.
Okay. 717. We can move
Talk about
back.
breaking barriers.
Yeah, I kind of had Dr. Brent on it, so we can go back to talking about being first.
And like the people that we, what it meant to see them breaking first. Like, I can always speak to my experience when, President Obama was lucky. That was a great night. Y'all know.
Man, twice.
Okay.
2 times.
I won't lie, I
You
cried.
can tell.
I cried bad.
Oh, you
I was
in
in New Jersey the first time,
Yeah.
and the second time I was in
First time.
I was in New Jersey.
This one, oh, this,
I cried that night.
this one.
Cried like a baby.
The other day I am a little sick. Just a little. Just a little. You said you cried though.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. It says we are excited about this movie because we are tired of seeing our people betrayed
I
in
saw
drug
that,
acts, violence, confrontation, forward pools, slaves, prisoners, and ghetto. I saw it like everybody put the name up on the screen.
Welcome. How much time we got? Yeah, we got on this restaurant.
Are you feeling better, Dante?
A little bit. There we go.
So I'm getting this made for my birthday. Look.
How you, wait, the or just like the?
Yeah, I have my hair. It's gonna be my face right there.
So what do y'all like? What do y'all think about Black Panther? And it's
I'm gonna have to send you her page so you can check.
on like
She's
us,
a, she's
you know
a
what I'm saying?
an
As
artist?
millennials.
Okay. See, this is like some other work right
Because I mean, most of the people, all of you were millennials, except Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
I'm her artist.
Yeah, I mean, so I was excited to hear Black Panther being made. you know, as a fan of Marvel, and also the fact that, you know, with Wesley Snipes trying to get Black Panther popping years ago, and you know, even forward, like I was just
Where's
like,
that
yes,
sign-up sheet there?
I got it.
you know, like yes, they're finally, you know, getting it done. So then I heard that April was going to be on the project originally. I was like, yo, okay, so it just came out.
She was supposed to be on Black
So
Panther.
she was serving. She had to, you know, had different things going on.
Yeah.
When April was going to be on it,
Lachey says, you sick, Dante, and Wakanda forever.
Hey.
I was kind of excited.
I think Dante said he had a sinus.
Oh yeah, I read it. Yeah, I read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was excited, and then when I heard, you know, Ron Coogler was attached to the film, you know, after Creed had come out, I was like, yo, this gonna be dope. Like I was already excited for Ava. I was like, okay, Ava. And then, you know, Ron Coogler, I was like, okay. And then when I actually saw it, man,
Morgan,
Amazing.
and
you want me
then
to turn the
knowing
radio
that
on in there so your kid can listen?
it's $110 million
Okay.
budget,
Yeah.
you know. So for me, it meant a lot, not only for the imagery, but also for the fact that, you know, our people gonna be paid.
Hey.
And they're gonna be paid, you know, almost equivalent to what, you know, white stars get. Like that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially knowing that they're still paying for it.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
Well, it's just okay.
Yeah, I give it a shot. I put us on here for Friday the 16th.
And Mallory,
Testimony.
for our pledge show, we have a sign-up sheet for people to give testimonials and to work the phones. If you want to sign up for times, just write your name or initials in the available slot.
Yes, Bethany girl, it was good. Let's not mention the finest.
Chevy Blue like world.
Hey.
The finest. There's a lot of black magic going on in that movie. Girl.
And I even really like a girl.
What's next week's theme gonna be?
Black Panther.
That's okay.
Back to Wakanda we go, okay? Wakanda forever, Black Panther lives.
Black Panther lives.
With the door of Elijah, what you mean?
That was my favorite part.
Man.
Lachey puts up a bunch of chocolate bar signs, and Bethany says, "Yes, Lord."
Yes, loud. Yes, loud.
Oh, Michael B. Jordan. Let's stop this.
Girl, he gained 30 pounds in his head and was still fine. Like,
Ronnie says, seen it 3 times. Great movie with deep undertone.
all right, well, Mr. Ronnie, you gave your support.
Hey,
That's like that.
don't hit some place.
Mr. Ronnie.
All right, 1 minute, you all.
This is my one time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jones, right?
For real. When we come back.
Oh, my shoulder's big.
Hit the moves show.
I'll show you the red on the first try.
Dang.
Y'all remember the Grow shorts? I used to hate when guys wear the Grow shorts. The stripes, the long shorts that come way past the knees, the stripes on
The picnic
the
show.
picnic shorts. Young Grow shorts. We used to call them Young Grow shorts.
Morgan, pull the mic a little closer to you. All right. 15 seconds, Ron.
Oh, yes, essence. All right, you all, and we are back. Thank you so much to Dr. Jones Branch for coming in and giving us her insight. It's always a treat. I've heard her talk a couple of times, and it's just like every
Amazing.
time, even though she kept saying nothing, every time she says something, man, it's new.
I'm telling you, look
It's
at
new.
Yo, she's about to get an offering.
New,
Damn,
okay?
tell me.
Cash out real quick.
Cash out.
So now we are going to go into another segment where we are going to talk about an article that we found pretty interesting, and it's Essence's Images Study, Bonus Insights. And this is an article that's just basically showing some of the representation about Black women in media. They did it in their November issue. I believe that's what it was in 2014. So we are going to look at that and just kind of see how we feel about some of the reflections that they have, that they've put out there. So Number one is negative imagery of black women is seen often twice as frequently as positive imagery. So it says 85% of our black women respondents reported they regularly see representations of baby mamas in media, while only 41% said they often see real beauties. So what do you all think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like that meme that you just, that was the Black Panther meme where it showed that, I like seeing my people like this instead of like, angry and blah, 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 and that's a testament to that, really.
I tend to agree with it that a lot of times our black men are placed in the media as negative. I think we were even like talking the other day, like for example, when you think of welfare, and you hear welfare, they always mention welfare queens when they talk about repealing and reducing the amount of aid. And welfare queen is used to paint a picture of a black woman,
and
not necessarily.
And to that point with welfare, y'all should Google the largest demographic.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And and that's stereotype.
But even when in the media when they bring up stories about welfare and aid and assistance, a lot of times it's going to be a black woman walking with her children versus a baby mama without a father. They're going to place that image there, or a black father and kid, but they're not necessarily going to paint them in the respect that there are also others struggling that need that assistance, and it's not a negative thing.
Like for me, I always think about lottery ticket. When she Byron,
yes,
like that. Everybody's not a baby mama.
Yeah.
I myself, I'm a single mother. I would never put myself in that Byron category. So I do think that we aren't seen as strong in that area. It's a very bad depiction, I feel.
But I think that kind of goes back to what Dr. Branch was talking about when she was saying that we are not allowed to be individuals.
Yeah.
So if we are seeing someone that is behaving in that way, a black person that's behaving in that way, that has nothing to do with us.
Mm-hmm.
And if that person chooses to behave like that, then they have every right without us having to look at them like, oh, they're making us look bad, or why are they behaving that way?
Another point that you mentioned, Chelsea, is that we're not often seen as strong. A lot of times they will paint us as being angry, like you mentioned, but they will also paint us as being strong, and so that when tragedy and things happen, black women are often told to be strong, be this, without and the moment that they do show any type of emotion outside of this strength, it's almost as if, you're not even a human. We need you for this moment right here. Mm-hmm. You should do this. You should do that, as opposed to, just letting them live and letting them be and being a person and being a human. So yeah, I totally agree with the fact that, we are often seen as one image over the other, and it's most times it's negative.
Well, do these images, do they perpetuate the stereotypes? So because we don't see very many, and this was done in 2013, I mean, we, obviously that's changed with, we got our ESAs, it's changing. That is
What did we
changing.
have back then? What do you guys think about like
the Wayans brothers?
Tracy Ellis Ross.
Kimberly Elise.
Yes.
Taraji.
That's
Taraji, yes. Regina Halls, yes. Yeah, back on those images, But I really, even today, I still feel like sometimes, with media, those images are still heavily skewed negatively versus, and I think when we produce the images, because we recognize these things, we tend not to showcase those images. We try to showcase all of us, the full spectrum of who we are.
All right, let's look at this one. It says both black and white women reported that the strongest influence for boosting their sense of worth is themselves. But while black women cited their mothers as the second strongest influence, white women say they look to their significant others to lift them up. Touch the nerve. So what do we think about that?
Man.
Not say from a male's perspective, since this is from
about black women.
No, like what do you think? Like what would you cite your strongest influence and your second influence as?
I would say me and then my mom.
Yeah.
But you know, I would say that being raised by her, you know, I mean, and not necessarily being raised by her, but the way that I was raised by her, you know, and the way that she was raised by my grandma, is that
The conversation continues on Facebook Live. This is KLK.
I don't know.
You keep answering the question. We just have to.
But like just the way that she did it, I guess, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying, and like she was always like, my grandma is very much so like, ain't nobody else gonna do it for me. I got it. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right,
And my mama was
right.
the same way, and so like to me, regardless of male or female, that's a good quality to have. You know what I'm saying? And the way that they perpetuated was that was something that could translate to us as males. You know, my mom had 3 boys. And so that was a quality that translated into us super easy because of that connection, I guess, that we had. And so, like, when I look at it, you know, and I think about, like, the qualities that I want to have, you know what I'm saying, or the qualities that I have, you know what I'm saying, whenever I'm going through something, and then the qualities that I want to have, I will point to her, you know what I'm saying, versus a significant other, because typically your significant other's somebody that reflects that parent, right? You know what I'm saying, or that, you know what I'm saying? Like men go after women that reflect their mom.
But do we have? But when we have that conversation, do we have to consider the breakdown of the Black household?
Absolutely.
Most white people,
I
they're
think
coming
that
from
the
2-parent households.
But I
right?
think that the way that we have to do it to go ahead is instead of saying that we have to be a certain way, so we have to have a father, a mother in the household. I think that at this point we have to work off and say, well, what we have to understand. First of all, we have to instill a point of family. You know what I'm saying? So you can't just have a kid and say, well, your goal in life is to be married and have kids.
Yeah.
Because that's a shallow explanation of what life is. But if you get them to understand what family is, I grew up around my family. They all did stuff for us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They all taught us certain things. And so when it comes back to that household, I think that we do need to get away from saying that there was a breakdown. And we do need to get away from shooting down that point of Black experience. You know what I'm saying, as the family. Because in my opinion, are more familiar than I mean, we are around each other the most. You know,
our family structure is different.
Exactly.
Our family structure is different.
Exactly.
Our
We
family
are
structure is
very
different. But also, you do recognize that our family structure is different. It is a reaction to what happened to our families. But at the same time, we are still close despite. You know what I'm saying? So I agree to your points, and both of your points, in that, you know, the reason why white women say that they look to their significant others is because their family structure is different.
Yeah.
And the fact that we look to our mothers because our family structure is different.
It really is, because like how you said, most white people grow up in a 2-parent home. I also think that that's a common misconception. I don't think that there's a race. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that that's defined by race. You know what I'm saying? Like, I work with plenty of white kids who lived with their mom or just lived with their dad. And I think that's imagery, and I think that's our portrayals as well.
They tend to highlight the fact that, you know, there are large percentages of Black families that are single parent. You know, but they're not also highlighting the fact that we also are close knit, and that we actually have family reunions. And
we had
I'm not saying no shade. That's not a shade thing. It's because for our family structure and for our culture, family is important.
Yes.
Not only is the mother important, but the grandma is important. The grandpa is important. The elders are important.
Yeah.
Our traditions are important. Being close knit and taking care of one another is important to no end. That when we move on and go beyond, we also seek to bring others along. You know, even if we don't have the funds and money to do what we need to do, we're still like, come on, Ray, come hang with me for a minute. You know,
even if you gotta be 5 to get in the buffet.
Exactly. You coming?
Come on, Ray.
5 right now.
And that's what like, one of the things that I always think about is like how my family was a part of every step I took, from my cousins, my mama, my grandma, you know what I'm saying? Like all of them aunts, uncles, like I'm talking about my grandma brothers and sisters to my mama's brothers and sisters, you know what I'm saying? And so like I think that like with that to me, that was a good thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that was a blessing. Like,
Yeah.
to me, that was amazing to have such a communal village, you know what I'm saying, that put into me, and still does to this day. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I never see it as a, I mean, I guess it could be seen as a breakdown, but they worked really, they worked really hard to fill those holes. You know what I'm saying? So there wasn't, you know what I'm saying? From my perspective, I ain't have no gaps growing up. Because I had everything I needed, wanted, any. You know what I'm saying? Like, I grew up in Wakanda, if you ask me. You know what I'm saying?
Even going back
For
to
real.
Black women saying that their mothers are their second strongest influence.
Yeah.
When you just said that about the single family homes, or most white kids growing up in a double parent, in a standardized family home.
Mhm.
I grew up with both of my parents.
Mhm.
But like when I think about it, and even my daddy said something to us now, he always say, well, I guess I just say nothing. Because I call her mama.
Yeah.
But I had my daddy there. My
Mama.
daddy was active, just as active as my mother was, but I always mama.
But think about it though, like most times in a two-parent home in a black family, a lot of times the father was the provider while the mother was the nurturer and, held it down, as well as being, the nurturer. They did both. They provided and they nurtured, as well as he's out there. I'm gotta go get it for my kids.
Yeah.
While she's like, I'm getting it for my kids, and I'm also coming home making sure, it's different roles.
And I think, and that went a long way for me, seeing that growing up,
Yeah.
seeing my mom hustle, go to work. She was in the military, you know what I'm saying, for 30 years. So I watched her go to working in uniform, you know what I'm saying, and come home and be that mom. Every weekend we was out somewhere different. Like some days I wouldn't see my mom all day, but better believe she always made up for that time. You know what I'm saying? And so like seeing that, like that to me was always something good. You know what I'm saying? And like even now, like my connection with my mom is that strong because I'm like, man, if there's anybody know how to get out of it, you know what I'm saying? It's her because she did that. You know, so for real. But that's why I think that like that is a
Hey, mama.
She said wave her or something. I don't know.
Hey,
what she was
OG. Shout out to our parents.
for real to the parents out there.
Big out there watching.
Oh, Vic, what's up?
That's interesting to me. I wonder who black women said was their strongest influence.
I think it said themselves.
Yeah.
Max is their mother.
Black women and white women reported strongest influence. Got you. And that is so true. We do inspire ourselves. We do.
And that's important though. That's
Black girl
that's
magic
extremely
is
important.
extremely important. Like being able to see ourselves pulling, and then we also influence and support each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, I can look at Chelsea and say, "Okay, lashes," Okay, and Morgan, okay, great. I see you, ponytail. That is positive. We and black women we do that for each other as far as imagery. Like we, especially like look at social media. We're gonna like something that say, "Come through, wig,"
Like I was at the gas station the other day, legit, and I have that blue leather jacket I have.
Yes,
I got out the car and these black ladies rolled that window down. I was like, "Yes, sis, yes." They jacketed. You know me, I'm crazy.
Exactly. You know what I'm
I'm shaking the fringes, and it was just my brother was like, "That was love." I'm like, "Yes, that's love," because we just connect on that level, you know.
And I think it's so cool seeing like so many platforms now emerging that are celebrating that. Because for so long, not to say that we didn't, but to see it now on a national, level where it's instantaneous, like it's cool. It's cool. Like Ebony and Jet were cool growing up. Like I loved getting our monthly subscription. I love getting the weekly Jet. I love standing like in the grocery store and reading the Jet and like, oh okay, and then inspiring to be some of the people that were in Jet. Okay. I can wait. Right? So it's
Shout out to Stephanie for sharing my video. Thanks, Stephanie.
Imagery and representation is important.
Yep, and to your point, like growing up, I remember more now than when I was growing up, but I remember like Rocket Power. Seeing them and being like, they're a little brown. Yeah. They're a little brown. You know what I'm saying? Y'all brown.
Yeah.
But But still, I used to be like, nah, I ain't proud. That was the closest, you know what I'm saying? But at that time, on Nickelodeon, that was the closest we pretty much had. You know what I'm saying? From that.
But Proud Family, you remember when Proud Family came?
And the name. They
Proud.
were Proud.
Mm-hmm.
The Proud Family.
And Uncle Bobby was a Kelly.
This was Kelly, y'all.
Don't.
Me and my brother was talking about Wizard Kelly the other day. They had a whole bunch of Wizard Kellys on the
Oh, this is good.
Their birthday video.
Yeah.
Wizard Kelly, y'all.
Man, the Proud Family music, that was so.
Is Zerika watching?
Yeah, Proud Family was
Hi,
so
Hey!
Did y'all read Ronnie Carter's comment?
Huh?
Ronnie Carter's comment.
Yeah, we are.
Dorika Mays
There
just
she go. Hey,
There's
her. There she go.
Hey, Dorika!
He said, look good picture.
VPN member of the month. I see you.
Okay. Dr. May.
Dr. May.
Dr.
May.
Dr.
And that's imagery too. Imagery too. Seeing representation here in town. You know, you going from nurse to doctor, and you are here, and you are doing it, and you living, and you thriving. And you look good at Black Panther. That was nice. You rocked it.
Yeah.
You and May rocked it.
You
We
have
did.
to tag Dorika in our picture on Facebook. I didn't tag her? I don't know, because we were.
Oh,
we was
nice.
there.
Oh.
Hey, what you know about that?
Hey. School Days is like one of my favorite movies. Like,
Okay.
School Days is one of my favorites. Like, I can watch it like all day long. You know why? Because once again, representation and seeing people in school, like Black people in school, like it's important.
Yeah.
So like my family, we watched all the Spike Lee movies.
Yeah.
They got their Black Panther excellent comments.
Go ahead and back. See, you should have did the party. You should have had a night.
Hey, we are. We ain't doing it this Saturday? Oh, this Saturday. Oh, yeah.
This Saturday. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
Like
we
next
can pull it.
If we don't want to do the 90s party for Saturday, we'll do it on the 30th.
The Renaissance, Renaissance.
Oh, that's true.
On the next Saturday.
This Saturday.
The Millennial Renaissance.
That's what I'm about to want today is Saturday.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Next.
All my Saturdays running together. I've been up since 6 o'clock. I coached 3 games. We won all 3 hours.
Hey. What's this about Millennial Party?
I want to do a small open mic for my birthday, and the location has not been decided yet. But just something, you know, I want it to be, even if a lot of people don't come, I want it to be intimate. I just want to be with y'all. This is cute. Can we just like slam, like Harlem Renaissance,
Black Renaissance,
ish, low lighting, yeah.
She said low lighting.
When I was just being different. I'm gonna snatch somebody's home. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Jill Scott.
Oh, Dorika said she loved
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yay! Hercules, we are. So, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
Promotion.
Saturday.
Oh, yeah. But I don't feel like we have enough things like that, like poetry lounges and places where you can go to like hear really good music, and like there needs to be more of that.
I think for us, like one of the things that we've got to be able to reclaim as the people, like we're reclaiming our individuality, but we also got to reclaim it. You know what? We ain't got to worry about others to do it. Just make it happen.
Yeah.
Like even if you don't own the building right now, rent one so you can get your spot. And just make it happen. Like, you know, you got that idea, go ahead and make it happen. Because like I think so many times, especially in this particular area, because we don't see so many thriving people that look like us, we get, you know, we just kind of feel like, just kind of, like, okay, I can't do this. I'm limited. I'm in the box, but it don't have to be like this.
No, and I think that for children to be able to see, children to be able to see us doing that and see us being on that platform, it does something to them as well. Because, like, I seen one of my girls that I coached, and she was like telling her friend, like, that's my coach. She works with kids. I want to work with kids.
Absolutely.
When I get older, and it's just like that made me feel like real support.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm on a platform.
Yeah. And
you are on a platform. That's the thing. You are on a platform. Everything that we do is on the platform. I think we've just got to be able to take ownership of that and say, guess what? We're on the platform. We have this. It's our time's out. No longer are we saying, okay, Martin dreams this. We in that time. Right now. Let's just shift it.
30 seconds, y'all. All right, we're gonna go back in and talk about
that feel in motion.
Hi, Mom.
Support here in the studio, y'all. For those watching on our Facebook Live feed.
If you want to do the live.
All night long.
Yeah, but
Sounds just like a dude.
All right, and we are back, you guys. We're winding down the hour, and we're gonna highlight some of our brothers and sisters from the community because it's always good to keep us fresh and relevant. So I'm gonna let Dante talk about Doctor. Don't forget the doctor.
Don't
Dr.
forget
AKA
the doctor.
Dr. Denarius Hempfield.
Okay, Dr. Denarius Monroe Hempfield, also known as Dr. D. He has, let's start from the bachelor's and then we're going to move up to him. So we have a Bachelor's of Science from Alabama State, Specialist in Education, Master's of Education, Master's of Arts in Social Justice and Public Policy, and a Doctor of Education and Education Leadership. He is one of the newest and freshest emerging voices of our generation. He is a leader, educator, speaker, activist, and generation changer who truly understands the importance of leaving a positive impact and legacy for future generations of progressive leaders in Metro Detroit, the U.S., and abroad.
All right, and secondly, we'll be talking about Megan Brown. Megan received her Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience from the University of Michigan in 2015, during which she worked as a researcher for the School of Public Health and for a biopsychology laboratory. During her 1L summer, Megan worked at a large law firm in Chicago. Brown, 25, was named editor-in-chief of the University of Michigan Law Review, which is ran by students. By all accounts, she is the first African-American to run the prestigious review. I want to be in places where people look around and say, there's not enough Black people there, Brown said this week of her goals. And I actually got that from an article that was written this week that she said that she would like to be in that position. So who are some other people that we can think about who are kind of moving and pushing us, movers and shakers of this millennium time?
Oh man, Millennials?
Yeah.
Chadwick, Michael, B, Lupita.
Man.
We already
It's our cast,
let's see. Kendrick. I think that a lot of people, I think that Kendrick is talking about some stuff that a lot of people miss. You know what I'm saying? And I know with music, that being the thing that I go to. I really want to highlight Megan. That's, y'all know, law is my thing, and that is super cool. And to be in places where there's not enough Black people, and to be comfortable in those spaces, in those environments, that's Megan Brown. That's a legacy. That's amazing.
I'm gonna go off the beaten path here, and I'm gonna name somebody. Soulja Boy, tell him.
Hey.
Soulja Boy. He started off like when he was a teen. Making beats and doing things. The young man was a millionaire before he was even like 18 years old. Off of just his own creativity and using his ingenuity in his bedroom. Moved his family from Batesville, Mississippi, up to Atlanta, Georgia, and was just growing and thriving. Had like the #1 hit, and the way he did it was really, really strategic. Going on. You remember Livewire and BearShare. So he would name his song.
That was still in music.
And where we going? We got disregard that. But what happened was he was naming his song as something, famous, so that when people were going downloading the, peer-to-peer file, they were, picking that song. Okay, and then when they would get it, like, what is this? But it was so catchy. You couldn't even get away from it. I was like, okay, it had the #1 hit. To the point where, Beyonce had sampled a song, and she's having to share writing credits with him. That's crazy. He is a millennial that will move things forward.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Where is he now? Like, what is he doing now?
He live in Atlanta.
That's
all I got for you.
He living in Atlanta. He's making stories,
Social challenge.
But I think he does. He has business ventures that still making money. I think he's still a money making.
Well, naturally, he's still getting royalties from his songs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if he owns the publishing to his songs, he's really getting money from them.
He is. Like, Soulja was still rich.
Oh,
But stuff like how Legacy just said, if he owns the publishing to his songs, I feel like that's more. Those are things that we as African Americans, we need to know that. We need to know these small ins and outs that they are not going to tell us. Like, let's just be for real. We're going to have to figure it out for ourselves.
And it's important that we go and search that. And we teach ourselves and we learn.
Absolutely.
Because I do think that we're living in a time where this right here, this cell phone and these tablets, that's the most powerful thing that's ever been invented. I'm convinced. I saw a commercial today, a Microsoft commercial with Common. And if you ain't seen it yet, you should go see it just for the poem that he says. And like he talks that real stuff, and he says that this technology is the most. I mean, it makes us more powerful than any of the generations that came before. It was just based off of what we have at our fingertips. You know what I'm saying, and what we can learn at our fingertips. But he ends it by saying that it's not powerful unless you make it powerful. You know what I'm saying? So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to teach yourself? What are you going to learn? What are you going to go out there and get, to better yourselves and to better people, in general?
And I just want to jump in there and say hi to Miss Kaylee Romine. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey.
Morgan, what about you? Who's someone that you think is a mover and shaker within the millennial bracket?
We got like 10 seconds left.
Ava DuVernay, she is really doing it for me. She is opening up doors for little Black children in a way that for a long time we've been restricted in terms of how we're able.
Attitude is everything.
Thank you.
I'm Mitch Anthony with
But we're still going, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
You'll
like
never learn if
with A Wrinkle in Time, you get to see a little Black girl save the whole world, travel throughout the universe. We don't usually get to see that. We look at Star Trek or we look at many sci-fi films and whatnot, and we don't usually get to see not only people of color, because every now and again you might see, a Black male here or there, but you see a Black woman or a Black child to play main characters such as this and be the hero. That is major.
Y'all know
that is
movie
major.
kind of made me think about from back in the day? Page Master. Y'all ever seen Page Master?
With Macaulay Culkin?
Yes.
That used to be the movie.
That definitely kind of put me back into that. But like to see my son, like looking at the screen, like, Mama, we gotta go see that.
Yeah.
Like we gotta go see that. Like, that was
That's
very.
that Black Panther.
Yeah, that was liberating me. Like that was like, okay, I like this.
236 video views, 600 plus page views for the show so far.
Awesome.
All right, y'all.
So we got one last talk break
Okay.
for the show.
So during the last talk.
Now, I was asking this for the rest of the show. Do y'all just want to keep this format, or do y'all want to maybe change it up to where y'all have more time to talk on air and go to a format like we do with community conversations, which wouldn't be any music during the show? But I'm pretty much open to whatever pleases you all.
What do you like?
Y'all like this?
I like this.
That's good.
Okay, well,
I
what
think
keep it
people
rolling?
appreciate the music,
Mhm.
and they appreciate the conversation.
So I guess when we go back in, we can talk about, I guess just wrapping it up, letting people know.
I mean, you just want to know.
Okay, yeah, we close it out.
What was you gonna say?
I was gonna say, we could just let people know, that we'll be coming to Black History events at A-State.
Let's do that.
Okay.
That way we
Do
can
we
talk
have a
about
list of the
Saturday.
events? No, but we definitely want to let them know we're gonna be ready to see David Banner.
David Banner.
Yes,
Oh,
who's there? David Banner.
David Banner.
David Banner. David Banner.
On the 22nd.
David Banner.
He performing?
No.
He's gonna be doing a talk.
For
No,
real?
but he gonna be there. I don't care. We
I
just
feel
gonna
you.
Where?
At
A-State.
Oh, okay.
At 7
David
o'clock.
Banner.
What day?
Huh?
And we're at the top break.
All right, you all, and we are back. Sorry, we got a little carried away, a little excited. But we just want to close the show out with just showing our appreciation to everyone, and just letting you all know how much we really appreciate you all backing us
Thank y'all. Thank
and
y'all.
this idea for the show for Black History Month. We really are just trying to show that, as millennials, just don't sleep on this, y'all.
we tapped in.
Don't sleep on
We
us.
tapped in.
I think that we are about to bring a totally different type of revolution to the world, and I want everybody to be a collective, and everybody to be able to experience something good from what's going on now, from millennials, Generation X, just from us as a collective whole. And I think that it's important that we continue to support each other, in everything that we do. So we will be making appearances at A-State throughout the month, to reach out to support the Black History events that are going on, and to also give you all, so you all can gain awareness of who we are. And if you all have any suggestions, you want to hear something on the show, you want to talk about something, we're always open for suggestions. Anybody else want to add anything?
Just to keep y'all posted on what's coming up, February 23rd, as she said, trying to do the poetry slam. Location pending,
Yes.
but this is something that's coming up for Chelsea's birthday coming up this week. Birthday girl this week.
Yes. And you all can be looking out for our Facebook. I'm going to be making us a Facebook tomorrow, so there we'll have a better view of our schedule. Also, I guess to close it out, we'll just do some closing remarks of what did you guys like best in this show? Like, what was the highlight for you?
I'm just happy I got to meet Dr. Brand. That is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So being able to sit down and talk with her and just pick her brain about all of these different issues, because she's looking at things from a very different lens.
Yes.
She's a very educated, she's a very intelligent woman.
Yes.
So that was a joy for me. That was a joy for me. That's like speaking in somebody like Angela Davis. Or,
Yeah, for me that was my favorite part too. Like I was telling Dante, I went to an open discussion at A-State, and Dr. Branch, she just said, like she said here, she's unapologetically Black, and me and Dante, I always say Dr. Branch, she fine. She's fine from the way she articulates to the way that she dresses, and just her knowledge is just like the cherry on top. Like, that was my favorite
My
part.
Facebook page from D'Angelo Clark says support is everything.
Everything.
Yeah, shout out to you all as well.
And that's to shout out, like you said, support is everything. We want to shout out to a lot of people around Jonesboro that's doing their thing. Mr. Clark, he's one of them. D'Angelo.
Yes.
He's one of those people that if you don't know him, you should get to know him. He's a great person, and he is doing great things for this community as well.
Yeah, they do a lot of the community outreach and libel. Keeping guns off the street, just making sure that people have knowledge. So, yeah, support is everything. They came out and talked with us and gave us some support on our when we did our youth conference. So, yes, absolutely. Shout out to you all as well. So, Mal, what was your favorite part of the show?
Oh man, the discussion about how Black women you know, they see their mothers after themselves as being their the person that they actually look towards for their influence. That was interesting to me. And also, and just in thinking about the fact that, you know, the portrayal of women, the portrayal of us as a people, that we are still being shown, you know, in negative lights, but the fact that we are now taking ownership on who we are, I'm grateful for that, and I'm actually hopeful for the generation to come that they may even have different experiences because of the fact that we are taking ownership, that we are paying attention to the images now, that we're not just taking what's being shown to us, and we're conscious of it and we're working to change it. You know, I think that's very, very important, and that was a good discussion tonight. And I think that's something that we should always keep about moving forward on sharing that, and also encouraging those, even if they don't look like us, look different from what we see to be the norm, but allowing them to showcase who they are, you know, and just encouraging.
Dr. What about you?
I think, so I got two things. One thing, when Dr. Brent said that it's important for us to understand that not only black people were civil rights activists, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't just a black thing, and black people weren't the only people with struggles in this country. That was important to me, and then also how we talked about those portrayals and how that leads into a person like Megan Brown, you know, where as far as we talked about how negatively, you know, and all these different connotations people have with the portrayal of the black woman or the black male or black body or a brown body in general, you know, a colored body in general. But then you have somebody like this saying, I want to be in places where there's not enough. You know what I'm saying? There's not many brown people around here, you know? And so, like, you go from that fear to now that excitement. You know, I want to be in those areas. I want to be that change for those behind me. And I think that we are living in a generation where that's the case. And it's always been the case, not necessarily this generation, but we're able to feel that way because of those past. You know what I'm saying? Because of our history.
We're going to have to stop there. I want to thank each and every one for tuning in. Next week, the panel is going to discuss Black Panther, so that definitely will be an interesting discussion. Have a great night. It's KLK 102.5 FM.
So I think